Now that we set up our first objective, let's go ahead and set up our first airfield that players can spawn at and take off from. So what I'm going to do is go to my mission group, set that as a working group. I'm going to go to File, Import from File. Again, I'm going to go to my FNF Templates, and this time I'm going to look for our Allied airfields. And I have two versions, the Allied Protected Airfield and an Allied Unprotected Airfield right here. So the difference is that the protected airfield has the icon to show that, hey, this area is protected and it does not include any AAA. And the Allied Unprotected Airfield does not have the icon, the circle around it to show, hey, this is a protected airfield. And it does include the AAA. So we'll go ahead and start with the Allied Unprotected Airfield. And where I want to add it is right here at OC. And to do that, you can see here it didn't show up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select our Allied Airfield Unprotected group and say Move Camera to Object. And with that selected, I am going to cut it by doing Control X and then select the player and say Move Camera to Object. And then right where AUK is, I'm going to place the Allied Airfield Unprotected by doing Control V to paste it. All right, let's go inside and take a look at what we have. So we have our scenery objects. So this is just like the trash inside our allied objective. This is just nice to have to make the airfield look really pretty. Then I have allied AAA and a flare. And this AAA is a little bit more dangerous than allied objective AAA. And then finally I have some triple R and our landing fires, which we'll come to later. Oh, I sorry. And then this is finally we have our allied airfield itself. And you can see here we have this command flip to axis. Actually, that's named wrong. It should be command flip to, and then we can do USAA, or maybe we want it to be Britain or whatever the case may be. So let's talk about that. So we'll go into this little command flip to um, whatever group. And you can see here, this one's to Great Britain, but I want it to be United States. So I'm going to say country code United States and say OK. And so now when this airfield comes into play, which it takes only 1 minute for that to happen, it will be flipped from its neutral code, which it is right now, to the correct airfield code. Okay, so let's go ahead and place this airfield correctly so that players can spawn at it and then taxi to the runway to take off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it so that the players have to taxi along this path right here, and then they'll take off this way. Now, you have to be careful about how you place this allied airfield. And what I like to do is go to the airfields category and select the fake field airfield. And you can see how the airfield will spawn. So our first player will spawn right here, then player two, three, so on and so forth. So if I have it placed like this, our first player will spawn right on top of this icon. Then the next player will spawn here, 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 and so on. So if I want them to really, really taxi far, then I place it this way, and our first player will start right here. And all the other players will move along this way, and they'll have to taxi like that. And if I place it right here, like I originally had it, then our first player will spawn here and he only has to taxi a little bit. And then the other players, will have to go down this line and so on. So I think right here is appropriate. The other thing is this yellow line right here. So this yellow line tells you the direction in which the player will spawn in. And I'm holding down Control and left click and dragging to set the rotation of how this airfield, or sorry, how the players will spawn in. And so I do want the players to sort of spawn in this way, right? So player two will spawn in this way, kind of following this road. And the other thing is I don't want it like this because players will spawn on top of the road. So I'm using this yellow line as sort of a guide to say, hey, even if you're a very, very big plane, then you will not spawn on top of the road and players that are traveling down the road, you won't hit them. Okay, now with that set, what we can do is go into the planes block under the airfield properties. So you can see where it has planes block. That brings up this sort of Excel dialog block to add in the different planes that we want. So I'm going to click on add, and it brings in a plane setting dialog block. And from there, I want to add in some allied planes. And the nice thing about this is it's all alphabetized, which is great. So let's say we want to add in a P40, and we want to have an unlimited number of those planes available to the player. And we want to allow them to have all of the modifications and all of the available payloads. So modifications are things like, different types of ammo, different engine categories, whether they have um, the back rest enabled or disabled, what different and payloads are like what different types of bombs can they take and rockets can they take, the 250, the 500, 70 kilograms, and so on and so forth. So on Combat Box, all mods are locked by default, and you have to whitelist the mods you want the player to have available. So in our case, we want them to have everything. We're going to say from 1 dot dot to 10 are all the mods available for that particular plane, in this case a P40. And for payloads, we're going to say from 0 to 2000, and that's going to give them every single payload available. And of course, the P40 doesn't have too many payload options or modification options, but just so you understand that Combat Box blocks all modifications and payloads by default, and you have to whitelist the ones that you want the player to have available to them. So we're gonna hit OK. And when we do, you can see now that the P40 has been added to our um, airfield. So players will have the P40 available to them. Then I have to go and do that for every single other plane that I want to add. So maybe I want to add the IL-2. And again, I want to add all the modifications. So we're going to do 1 dot dot 10, 0 dot dot 2000. That's going to give the player every single modification available for the IL-2. Oh, I set the number wrong here, so we'll give them unlimited IL-2s as well. Then I'll hit OK, hit save. And now at this particular airfield, P40s and IL-2s will be available to the players. All right, when we come back, we'll talk about how to set up the triple R and some of the scenery objects.